The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Monday, August 14th. I hope you had a great weekend. Looking forward to a fantastic week. I will be traveling a little bit this week. I'm leaving on Wednesday, and I'll come back on Thursday. I'm going to try to do a show off on the road on Thursday, but no guarantees. But there won't be a show on Wednesday. So just to set expectations. Yeah. Hopefully on Thursday there'll be a show in the morning. Probably won't be an evening show. And then the Thursday evening show will move to Friday. So we'll do 2 shows on Friday, 2 shows on Tuesday. Today and tomorrow will be on schedule. All right. Let us see. Where are we? We've got a lot to talk about today. A lot of things going on in the world, but a lot of it's pretty quick, so we can get by it pretty quickly. All right, so I haven't commented on this yet, and I don't have factors. I don't have a lot to say, but about it. But this horrific fire in Hawaii last week. Almost 100 people are dead. This thing happened fast. Probably a lot of things failed. Water failed. Local authorities failed. The electric power companies already being sued for not shutting down the power. A lot of stuff is going to happen. There's going to be a lot of recrimination, but the reality is, I don't think anybody could have done much here. Just the circumstances of a hurricane passing by, causing winds, but also causing dry air, which is weird because you think of a hurricane as causing wet air, causing dry air, a fire being ignited, and just sweeping through the town of Lahaina, which was the ancient capital of Maui. Homes just burnt fast. People escaped into the ocean. They escaped into anywhere they could, but for a lot of people, they didn't even realize what was happening, and they were dead before they realized what was going on. Super sad. There were a bunch of horrific stories, people burnt alive in their cars, and other things. So yeah, just our thoughts go to the people, to the survivors in Maui, and who've lost friends and loved ones and neighbors and relatives and everything, and it's a sad thing. But these are the kind of natural disasters that happen, and there's little we can do about them. This will be blamed on climate change. This will be blamed on human whatever. But the reality is that these things happen, and they're horrible when they happen, but they do happen. Part of the risk of being alive is the real possibility of death. Nature out there, doesn't want to kill you, but certainly does everything in its power to kill you. It's not friendly to human beings. This is why, technology and science and better building and better everything is so crucial, and which mostly requires, at this point in our civilization, burning fossil fuels is so valuable and so important. We are a being that changes our environment to fit our needs, and we got to make our homes fire protected, hurricane protected, earthquake protected, because nature out there can't rely on it to keep us safe. Nature, if it had a desire, it doesn't, but if it had a desire, one would have to conclude that its desire was to wipe human beings out. It's certainly not friendly to us, as I said. All right. Quick reminder, we do have $250 to raise on these morning shows, so please consider contributing something. You can do it on a sticker or on a super chat. But please consider, for those of you who are live, to support the show. Those of you who's not live, please consider doing a monthly contribution on Patreon or on PayPal through yaronbrookshow.com/support. I've seen a nice increase on Patreon. We've got to keep that going. But there are still hundreds of people out there who listen to the show who do not yet support it financially. And it would be great if we got those hundreds of people. I could stop bugging you because we'd be in a financial situation where it would be done. All right, Hunter Biden, the gift that keeps on giving in terms of news. I guess the end of last week, over the weekend, we got an independent counsel appointed by the Justice Department to investigate. This gives the attorney in charge, this guy Weiss, more authority to investigate this, independent of the hierarchy within the Justice Department. He now gets his own resources. He gets his own people. Everybody's upset by this. Nobody's happy. Like the Hunter Biden people are going, wait a minute, you were reneging on a deal. We had a deal. We had a plea deal, and you guys are walking away from it. What the hell is going on here? And the Republicans are going, this guy isn't the guy we want to be an independent counsel. He's too friendly to the Bidens. He struck a plea deal with them. Then he must not be a good guy because he struck a plea deal with Hunter Biden. Anyway, nobody's happy, which is a good sign, I think. I think if somebody was happy, that would be a bad sign. That would be a sign maybe something was fishy about the whole thing. Weiss is a bit of a strange appointment. I will say this. Usually independent counsels are independent in the sense that they come from outside of the Justice Department. They come outside of the government. They're typically not working as government employees. For example, the independent counsel investigating Trump on January 6th and the document case was a prosecutor in The Hague, and other prosecutor in Hague, but not within the kind of the bureaucracy, the American justice bureaucracy. Other independent counsels have been private attorneys that have been brought in to do this. Weiss is an acting attorney within I guess the Justice Department, or and so it's a bit unusual. But I know nothing negative about this guy. I know no reason to think that he's going to be bad. But I do know that Ted Cruz is flipping out, furious, according to the headlines anyway, and that Hunter Biden himself is super unhappy with this because it means that they've reneged on the plea deal. So again, I take solace in the fact that nobody is happy. Nobody's happy. Kudababa says they legally must be from outside the government. I thought so too, but so there must be something here. I don't think they would have done this if it was illegal, because then it defeats the whole purpose of having an independent counsel. So we'll see what kind of explanation they have for the third party thing, but it doesn't seem like they would do something so blatantly stupid as to violate the law in the appointment of the independent counsel and therefore make the whole thing null and void. So we'll see how it all plays out. I did find it interesting that over the weekend, James Comer, remember James Comer heads up the House GOP committee looking into, this is the House Committee on Oversight, looking into the Hunter Biden case. During the weekend, Comer did say, and I, maybe he's listening, maybe somebody's listening to your own book show and making this an issue, but he did say that he thought it was very inappropriate and a bad sign that Jared Kushner got $2 billion from the Saudis for his private equity fund. He didn't think it rose to the same level of kind of potential corruption as the Hunter Biden story, but he thought it was not good. It was definitely something that should be looked at, and it was not a positive thing. It was not good. Wow. I mean, hey, and he's Republican, right? So again, maybe somebody is listening to this show, because I don't know anybody else who's made a big deal out of the Kushner story other than me. So yeah, maybe somebody's yeah. Coleman said Kushner crossed the line of ethics with the Saudi deal, right? And so it seems like Republicans are turning on Jared Kushner with regard to this. But yeah, fun to watch. And I talk about fun to watch. All right, Trump is going to be indicted this week, probably, by the attorney in the state of Georgia, an accusation that tried to overthrow and acted to overthrow the Georgia election. So this is fourth indictment. This will be Trump's fourth indictment. 2 at the state level. Well, 1 in the city of New York, 1 in this county in Georgia, and then 2 federal. And this one might be the most interesting one because they might, which I find would be super ironic and interesting, they might actually use RICO on Trump. They might actually accuse him of a conspiracy to commit a crime and use RICO. Who knows what implication that has? I don't know what that allows them to do. I know what it allows them to do in the financial industry when they use RICO. But RICO, of course, is something that was used. Congress passed to go after the mafia in the 1970s, and then was used. This is the irony of it. Giuliani was the first one to use it to go after businessmen, after financiers, and it will be super weird and interesting if Georgia uses it against Trump. And it'd be interesting what kind of implications that has, what they can do, what kind of burden that places on Trump, what kind of burden that places on the state of Georgia. But anyway, this might be a very, very detailed, multi-layer, multi-level kind of indictment. They've got a lot going on from the famous phone call that Trump made into the to Republicans, high-level Republicans in the state of Georgia, trying to convince them to find him some additional votes, to tampering with voting machines, potentially done by Trump lawyers, to fake fake delegates to the convention, and who knows what else. So we will see. It's making the case that for 2 months Trump tried really, really hard. Even if he'd overturned Georgia, he still would have lost. But tried very, very hard for 2 months to overturn the election in Georgia, and illegally. So, wow. We are heading towards potential constitutional crises. We're heading towards another contested election. We're heading towards a Republican primary that's just going to be a circus. We've also got Trump refusing to sign the Republican Party pledge that all the candidates who participate in the debates promise to support the ultimate, whoever the Republican Party chooses as a candidate. So Trump is refusing to sign that because he's like, I'm not going to support DeSantis if he wins. And maybe some other candidates not wanting to sign it because they don't want to support Trump if he wins. So who's going to be in the debates if nobody signs this pledge? I know some people have signed the pledge, like unfortunately, what's her name from South Carolina. But so who knows how these debates are going to play out? The first debate is in August, soon, like in 2 weeks, I think. And Trump has already said he's not going to participate. We'll see if he does in the end. But just the drama and the theater and the craziness and the circus. The circus as it is evolved with the Republican primary is something. And then you've got on the Democratic side, you've got a president that nobody likes. Democrats don't like him. The Democrats don't really want him. But the only guy who's running against him is crazy RFK. Nobody wants RFK, or at least nobody sane wants RFK on the Democratic side. Even the Kennedys don't want RFK. And nobody else has the balls, the guts to challenge Biden. Everybody wants somebody to challenge Biden because the Democratic Party, if they had a serious challenger, might actually vote for the challenger. Biden is old. He can't focus. He can't think. He has no charisma. In spite of actually having a decent economy, he seems to be unbelievably unpopular and doing awfully in the polls. And in every respect, just doing badly, and yeah, and yet nobody will challenge him. Nobody will go up against him. So just a bizarre political reality we're facing in the U.S. Unprecedented, I think, in terms of the hostility, but also in terms of just the incompetence, and in terms of the uncertainty about not just who will win, but I don't know what's actually going to happen. Is the lead Republican going to land up in jail? Is the Democrat even going to be breathing on election day? And will the Democrats have to appoint somebody in the last minute? It just, yeah, exciting. A lot of you know, Trump is going to be running for president while fighting 4 different lawsuits. I don't know. At the very least, you could say, you know, that it's entertaining like no other election has been. We can say that, right? All right, let's see. Argentina, talk about entertainment. God, who would have thought? I remember being in Argentina last year, and this possibility kind of came up, and nobody thought it was possible or real or viable. But Javier Milei, I'm probably not pronouncing it right, just got the most votes in the first round of the Argentinian presidential election. He solidly beat everybody else. He solidly beat the center left. He solidly beat the center right / conservatives. He is now the leading candidate for president of Argentina. Now, who is this Javier Milei? I mean, first of all, this guy is a PhD in economics who claims to be an Austrian with monetarist leanings, so some combination of von Mises and Milton Friedman. Those are his inclinations. So a free market guy. Now, every article I see compares him to Donald Trump and Bolsonaro. And there's certain elements that are comparable to both Bolsonaro and Donald Trump. But here's the difference. Bolsonaro and Donald Trump had no idea, no conception, and no view of economics. They weren't free market guys. They were just guys about power. They hated the left. They were conservatives. We'll get to Milei's conservative part. They were reactionary. They were all over the place, right? But they had no economic policies. They had no strong views about economics. This guy is the most free market presidential candidate anywhere in the Western world since Coolidge, probably. I mean, he makes Ronald Reagan look like a statist. Now, this is what he stands for, and to compare him to Trump and Bolsonaro and so on is lazy. It's just lazy and stupid. Now, there are respects in which he's similar to them. He hates the establishment. He's very anti-establishment, very anti-elites. But he also lives in Argentina, where, yeah, God, they've had 100 years of just rotten, horrible, disastrous establishment politicians and elites who've just brought the country to the brink of collapse and who have instituted nothing but policies that have been destructive and horrific for the country. At least American politicians have done it, I guess, more slowly, right? More slowly. So, but yeah, I mean, authoritarianism and military governments and the whole shebang. So, yes, here's a guy who does oppose all that, but what's there not to oppose? Absolutely oppose it. given the corruption of Argentinian politics, given the statism, given the authoritarian nature of Argentinian politics, good for him. Now, he's got some bad ideas. He's very anti-abortion, even in the case of rape. He is religious, so he would try to overturn the abortion laws in Argentina. He is, as I said, he's very religious, so in terms of all of that bad stuff. But here's what the New York Times says his economic policy is. They of course think this is horrific, but this is what they say he wants to do. He has proposed dollarizing the economy. That is basically shutting down the Argentinian central bank and making Argentina move to the dollar. I think that's brilliant. I think that is a fantastic idea, and really brilliant. I'm told by some Argentinians he's a fan of Ayn Rand's, but he's also he's far from an objectivist, and he's no real fan of Ayn Rand. So let's not associate with him Ayn Rand, because he's not a Randian. He's a libertarian, but he's not a Randian. I don't think in any kind of respect. But here's what he wants to do: abolish the central bank and dollarize the economy. Wow. That would revolutionize Argentina immediately and would reduce inflation immediately to the levels of inflation in America, which is 3-4%, whereas in Argentina it's 116%. So that, just like that, would completely change the Argentinian economy for the better, put it on a stable footing, which is the dollar. I know some of you hate the dollar and think it's about to collapse, but I don't think so, as I'll tell you tomorrow night. And by Argentina, by stabling it, wow. He wants to, but that's not the end of it, right? He's proposing drastically lowering taxes, not a little bit. Not like Republicans in the United States. We're going to take the marginal tax rate and lower it a little bit and lower. He's talking about slashing taxes across the board, really reducing them. Now, granted, Argentina has very high taxes, and it has all kinds of weird taxes on export and on import and everything, tariffs up the kazoo, and he would eliminate all of that. He is proposing, here's something you don't hear ever from an American politician. He is actually proposing cutting spending. Again, dramatically cutting spending. He wants to charge people to use the public healthcare system. Now, I'd prefer if he moved to privatize the public healthcare system. And my guess is that's what he really wants, but he's afraid he can't get that passed. Let's see. He wants to close or privatize every single one of the state-owned enterprises in Argentina. Now, Argentina sits on a bunch of natural resources, a huge amount of natural resources. Imagine what would happen if you privatized that, and if you privatized the mining, and if you privatized the companies that extracted it, if you privatized the export and import. He wants to eliminate, this is a little familiar, he wants to eliminate the health, education, and environment ministries. By the way, Argentina sits on oil reserves. He would privatize that and encourage the exploitation of that. So this is the closest, by far, somebody who calls himself a libertarian has ever come to winning the presidency. The elections are going to be, I think, in November, or maybe the runoff is in November. In October, the elections in October, and then if nobody wins that, there'll be a runoff in November. But he is now the favorite. And as such, we could have a small L, maybe it's a big L libertarian, as president of a country of 58 million people. Now, here's what he calls himself. He calls himself a short-term minicarist, i.e., somebody who believes in government. Minicarists are people who believe in a government, in a limited government. He calls himself a short-term minicarist, but a long-term philosophic anarcho-capitalist. So, but he's a paleo. He's against, a lot of. So he's like the Mises caucus. So this is probably. I mean, the Libertarian Party in the United States must be beyond itself. Anarcho-capitalist everywhere must be going crazy and nuts. And of course, The danger here is that he gets elected and he completely screws it up, and he sets back the cause of economic liberty, who knows how many decades, because of that. But we could also hope that he gets in and he does a few of these things. He's not going to turn Argentina into an anarchist state, but he's going to do a few of these things and make Argentina a relatively rich country, and that'll at least resurrect some support, maybe globally, for free markets. Anyway, as somebody removed from Argentina, although plans are for me to go there at some point and give a talk, maybe early next year. This is interesting, and it's going to be fun to watch from the outside, and it's fun to see how this evolves and what happens. At the very least, I would expect him to push whatever other candidates towards debating and talking about free market ideas. Batista says, "Come soon, Yaron. I wanted to come in December, but they've canceled my trip. So in late November, early December, it looks like my trip's getting canceled. So, I'll probably be coming in March, April, May, something like that next year." All right. Wow. I mean, very, very strange. I mean, he's obviously Red Ayn Rand. He's, he also thinks he's a weird guy. He also thinks that Ben Bernanke is the greatest Fed chairman in all of history, and is a huge admirer of Bernanke's. That's just weird and wrong, but okay. so he's a kind of a admirer of monetarism, and this is why I think he actually trusts the dollar, because he trusts the people at the Fed somehow when he really shouldn't. Okay, two quick stories, both of this one I've talked about, but I just thought I'd commemorate the fact that the ruble has just crashed to the level of 100 rubles to the dollar. This is the lowest or the cheapest the ruble has been since the very short crash that it had in March of last year, at the beginning of the thing, and then at the beginning of the invasion, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. After that, it bounced back. This seems more sustainable. This seems more problematic. The central bank has already hiked its key rate to 8.5%. 8.5%. That's pretty high. That has to hurt the Russian economy, as does the ruble. It's impossible to import anything at these kind of rates that's affordable. This is raising the cost of living, lowering standard of living, raising interest rates to 8.5% is devastating for Russian businesses. So this is just an indication of how bad the Russian economy is faring, how bad things are going. When the ruble was strong at the beginning of the war, everybody says, "Oh, see," but I said at the time it's being manipulated, and it was, and there's only so much the Russian central bank can do in manipulating the currency. The people, the commentators on Russian TV are freaking out. They want to fire the people at the central bank. They want to replace them. They want to challenge them. They want different. Anyway, they're freaking out. They're completely freaking out in terms of all of this. So it is interesting, and I think you'll see more of this. I'll update you more on the war and what's going on the front in the next later this week or early next week. There are certainly interesting developments. All right, finally, an interesting story out of Afghanistan. Now we know what happened in Afghanistan. We know about Biden's. We know about Trump. Trump cutting the peace deal with the Taliban, and then Biden, basically extracting all American troops out of there in a shameful, disgusting, America running from the scene with its tail between the legs, set up by Trump's shameful, deal with the Taliban. I mean, one of the more disgusting things an American president has done. Well, the Taliban has taken over. It's as bad as it always has been. They promised to moderate. They promised to treat women nicely. They promised not to let terrorists into the country and all of this. They've reneged on every single one of those promises. They're horrible. But this is the problem. The Taliban had been fighting a war that America let them win, or let them at least not lose, since 2002. That is, for 20 years, these men have been fighting, and young men have been trained to fight. And one of the things, so there's a culture among the Taliban in Afghanistan of warriors, of fighters, of young men who are used to battle. And now they're bored. They're bored because jihad has been successful in Afghanistan, and they're like, now what? And the whole region is struggling with this. So many of them are spilling over into Pakistan, where they are engaged in attacking the Pakistani military, engaged in fighting other groups. They've joined the Pakistani Taliban, and they're fighting with them. There's also fear in countries to the north of Afghanistan, in Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, the other stands, that some of these fighters are going to be involved over there and get engaged in fighting over there to bring jihad and to bring an Islamic State over there. You're also seeing in Afghanistan a significant resurgence of Al-Qaeda and of Islamic State, and both of these have, of course, global ambitions and have the potential of taking these restless warrior young men who want to go and fight for God, and have seen how successful they've been against the Americans in Afghanistan itself, and they would like to take the fights to the Americans, and like to take the fight to the Europeans, and they have global ambitions. So what happened in Afghanistan, as I predicted, and many others predicted, would happen is that this has emboldened the jihadis. This has created a massive recruiting base of young Afghan fighters to engage in terrorist attacks all over the world. It has created a training and logistics and a leadership base from which terrorist attacks can be planned. Remember that Al-Qaeda was quiet for 5, 6, 7 years before they started launching attacks in the United States in the late 1990s. And it could be that it takes them 5 years to get organized to launch attacks against the United States and against the Europeans. In the meantime, they're going to create havoc in the region. I think even the Chinese and the Russians are worried about this, because they both have radicalized Muslim populations. So really, everybody in Asia is worried about this, but it's not clear. Nobody wants to go to Afghanistan to deal with it. Nobody wants to actually win a war in Afghanistan. Nobody actually wants to do what would be necessary to win such a war. So everybody's staying out of it, watching it from afar, and worrying about it. Again, the main victims right now, the Afghans themselves, and of the non-radicalized population, and of course the Pakistanis. So we will see. We will see. We will see how this evolves, but it ain't good. It ain't good. All right, that is what I had for today. Thank you, guys. Let's see. Thank you. We are about 150 short of our goal. We've got 80 people watching, so that's a good number of people. It's $2 a person. We could cover this, cover the gap pretty quickly. We've got a few questions, but not many. We got some money. Dave Dean, thank you, $50. Really appreciate that. And let's see, Catherine, Fred Harper, and more from Catherine, Mike Dial. So there's a you can use the stickers, which is what all of those people that I just mentioned used in order to support the show, value for value. If you're listening, I assume you're getting some value out of the show. Those of you live, those of you not live, as I said, you can support the show through Patreon or Subscribestar or PayPal, YaronBrookShow.com/support. Patreon seems to be the most popular right now. There are hundreds of you out there who do not yet support the show, who do not yet provide value for value that you get from the show. You can support it at $2, $5, $500 on Patreon, and that'll be great if we kind of build up a community on Patreon and PayPal. Thank you, Darlene. So we got a couple of questions, and then we'll call it a day. And in the meantime, we have about $130 left in order to get us to our goal. Batista said, I was hoping to hear you talk about Milei for a long time, although I think he has some questionable attitudes, such as saying his sister is his moral guide. Apart from that, he is a Rand reader and a great economist and intellectual. Yeah, I mean, he's anti-abortion. He's very religious. He's got real problems. His anti-abortion certainly is a problematic policy. He is quite, from what I understand, he's quite religious. That can't be good, and it'll impact social policy within Argentina. But look, Argentina is in such a mess that they need a shock to the system, and somebody like this can provide that shock to the system and get things maybe going economically. He is an anarchist, but I don't think his anarchy will really come into play. He has a more fundamentally and more importantly, I think, for what his presidency might be like, and we still don't know that he's going to win, is that he's an economist. He's a PhD in economics, and as a consequence, I think that he's going to approach whatever economic reforms he's going to propose for Argentina. He's going to approach them seriously, kind of with a proper methodology, and really work to put Argentina on the right footing into the future. And I hope he is successful. In that respect, I also worry anytime somebody is a avowed anarcho-capitalist that he's going to screw it up and destroy it. Now, I hope that what happens is that there are a lot of good free market economists in the Spanish-speaking world in Latin America. Let's hope that one of the things that he can achieve is to bring a lot of those economists to come and work for him in Argentina, and to really put together a reform plan that, and this is what Bolsonaro tried to do in Brazil and wasn't very successful, but to really bring the kind of intellectual forces he needs to Argentina to really completely revolutionize the whole thing. Now, one other thing I will add: winning the presidency is not enough, right? Because he doesn't have kind of the support in Parliament, and I don't know that he's going to have it. He's not going to get it. So how do you completely upend the existing order? How do you completely reform an economy without the support of a parliament and without becoming an authoritarian? That is going to be a major challenge. But he's going to have to find a way to do it and be radical about it, because if he doesn't do big things, it won't change the dynamic within Argentina in a big way. And if the circumstances in Argentina don't change in a big way, then he's going to be discredited, and the whole idea of free markets will be discredited. And that, of course, is the real danger. Thank you, Batista. I know that's his first super chat. And just to give you a sense of the Argentina peso, YouTube says a 675 Argentina currency is worth $2.36. It used to be worth a lot more than that. And that's probably the official rate. The unofficial rate is probably around $1. All right. Let's see. Iron Meerkat from Israel. As long as he doesn't harbor Russian war criminals when all this is said and done, who knows? Who knows if he harbors Russian war criminals or not? I really don't know. I don't know what his attitude is to Russia. I really think his focus is going to be, he's got so much to do within Argentina. And look, he's going to be hated by every other regime now he hasn't won yet, so let's be clear. But he's going to be hated by every other regime in Latin America. All the other regimes in Latin America, all of them, are now run by real leftists. So he's going to have problems up the kazoo. The United States is going to be a problem. The Biden administration is not going to be friendly to him. He's going to want to dollarize the economy. I wonder how friendly the Fed is going to be. They should encourage it, but will they? Is really hard to tell. And is going to be really interesting. And it'll be really interesting how that is done and how that happens. But what the Fed's response to, suddenly you get 58 million people, that's 1/7 or 1/6 of the American population, added to the daily use of the dollar. We've already got El Salvador, and you've got Ecuador, and you've got Panama, all in the dollar. But 58 million people. This is major, revolutionary, but I think phenomenal, and I think good for the U.S. too, because it solidifies the dollar as a currency. But it will put some pressure on the Federal Reserve in terms of how this affects monetary policy and how you use the dollar. The Federal Reserve is going to have to adjust to it. Not going to be simple. We might talk about it tomorrow night when we talk about the dollar some more. Shazbot says, is there a chance that Putin or his successor might sell some of Russia's nuclear weapons if their economy sinks low enough? I don't think so. I don't know who they would sell them to. I mean, maybe the North Koreans, but the North Koreans have no money. Who has money to buy nuclear weapons? The Iranians. I think the Russians are a little afraid to sell it to anybody because those weapons could be targeted at Russia. I don't think the Russians trust anybody. So, no, I don't think so. Not to say it couldn't happen, but I just don't think so. The Russians are helping Iran, but they really don't want Iran to get a nuclear bomb because, Russia has problems with Muslims, and if Iran suddenly, sides with the Muslims, then Russia would have a problem if they have nukes. So while they help Iran and they might assist Iran, to what extent do they really want Iran to get nukes? I don't think so. I think it's more they want Iranian money and they're pragmatists and they don't think long term. But if you really push them, I think they'd say no. We don't want Iran to have the nuclear weapons. And they support Iran because it pisses off the Americans. A big part of what motivates policy in places like Russia is what is going to piss off the Americans. All right, we have 84 people watching. We need about $84. Stickers, just $5. Yes, did a $2 sticker. Thank you. Yes. Darlene did a $2 sticker. I mean, if everybody right now did a $2 sticker, just show support. Less than a coffee at Starbucks, we would be over the top. And hopefully, you think my show is more valuable to you than one coffee at Starbucks. But all right, Milkat says I'm having. I hate this word, and I can't pronounce it. Schadenfreude over the prospect of Afghanistan being Russia's and China's problem. Well, remember, Afghanistan was Russia's problem forever, for a long time, like during the 1980s. It's never been China's problem, but it could become China's problem. I mean, there's a reason why the Chinese are so insistent on oppressing the Uyghurs. The reason they're oppressing them is the Chinese are really, really, really afraid of Muslim terrorism. And they had Muslim terrorism about 10 years ago, and it was very unpleasant, and a lot of people were killed, and the Chinese just basically clamped down. I mean, and they want to continue clamping down. But the Chinese are already worried about Islamic terrorism, and with the spillover from Afghanistan, this could be a greater reason for them to worry. But I think we in the West should worry. Ultimately, the Taliban, Al Qaeda, ISIS got their best PR, their best recruitment when they were fighting America and they were fighting the West. So for them, nothing quite beats being going out there and fighting Western allies. Thank you, Enric. Thank you, Silvanos. Only $70 to go. Thank you, Mirkat. Okay, last question. So if you want to support the show, now's the time to do it quickly. Otherwise, we're going to call it a day. Sanity Spa from Norway. Wow. How do you see the Scandinavian countries evolving regarding personal liberty? Right now, they are fairly highly ranked on the Heritage Economic Freedom rank. I mean, I don't know. I'm not an expert on Scandinavia, and I don't know exactly how things are going to evolve. I do think whatever happens in Scandinavia, the evolution will be slow. I don't think there's a strong incentive, maybe with the exception of Sweden, but I don't think there's a strong incentive in Norway and Denmark. And I know Finland's not part of Norway, but it kind of is, in my mind anyway. There's no incentive to really rock the boat too much. Life for most Scandinavians is pretty comfortable. Most people seem pretty satisfied with the conditions of today, and how things are handled. How things were handled. I mean, nobody is complaining much about anything, really. Scandinavians are not big complainers. They didn't complain about how COVID was handled. They didn't complain about their economy. They don't complain about the different aspects. So I think whatever happens, it's going to evolve slowly. I don't see Scandinavia moving away from its current model, which is fairly free market, and quite strongly free, personal freedoms. I think that is, in the Economic Freedom Index, Scandinavian countries rank about the same as the United States, sometimes higher. And I don't see them moving away from that. They've become, not rich, but they become comfortable with that. There's no urgency. I mean, there's some urgency in Sweden because of their inability so far to integrate the Muslim population, the lack of willingness to impose the rule of law on the Muslim population, and therefore the increase in gang violence and the increase in Sweden. So I think that there's a real challenge in Sweden on how to deal with the Muslim migrants that they brought in, and they're going to have to think about it, and they're going to have to solve it. And if they don't solve it, then the populist right is going to solve it for them, and that I think will be unpleasant for most Swedes. So they need it's pretty simple in my view what needs to be done. First, you need to impose the rule of law. First, you need to be super tough, and you need to be very clear with the immigrant population that the laws apply to them, that they're expected to live up to the standards of the law in Sweden, not in Iraq, and that they will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. They will sit in jail, and maybe the laws need to be made harsher for rape and gang violence and violent crime. And the police need to go into these neighborhoods, and they need to clean it up. They need to arrest the gang members. They need to get the power to be able to do that. And that's step number one, has to be the rule of law. You cannot have a civilization without the rule of law. Then, you've got to get them off of welfare, and you've got to get them working. And that's the challenge, is without work, there is no integration into Swedish society. You've got to get them into the job sites. You've got to break up these neighborhoods. You've got to get them to where the jobs are. You've got to find ways to force them to do that. And one way to do that is to stop the welfare payments. So all of those are the kind of things that have to be done in a place like Sweden. Norway doesn't have that problem. Norway has a problem of declining productivity and more and more reliance on kind of a welfare state mentality, and so they can't afford to increase the welfare state. They want to move against that, and this is why in Norway you get more right-wing governments. Denmark and in Finland, are kind of cruising on comfortable lives, on a comfortable situation where things are comfortable and decent, and why rock the boat? So that's how I think it's going to happen. I don't think the problems are going to come from Scandinavia in terms of greater statism. Much more likely to come from Central Europe, France, and Germany, which have much more difficult economies and less of a comfortable status quo. All right, we're only $40 away. 2 $20 questions and we're done. Paul is asking one of those $20. What do you think of Paul Zeihan, the global strategist? So I've done a couple of shows on Paul. So you might want to just search my channel, put in your own book, Paul Peter Zeihan, and you'll get it. I basically think he's interesting. He has a lot of interesting things to say. I think he's very observant about certain phenomena in the world. I think he has a very good understanding of the benefits of trade and the benefits of globalization and how amazing life has become over the last 50 years. So he's not one of these, last 50 years have been a disaster for the working class. I mean, a disaster. He gets it, how beneficial globalization has been. And he worries about the disappearance of globalization. I think he's a little bit too pessimistic about its disappearance. But we will see. He might be right on the button, not because I think it's inevitable. He kind of thinks it's inevitable, but because I think that our obsession with turning China into an enemy and China's obsession with maybe becoming an enemy of the United States is going to make the world a less wealthy place and less amenable to trade and less amenable to economic growth. It's a real problem. So we don't have a strategy with regard to China, and that's a real problem. And of course, the war in Russia is not helping. I also think he's too much of a demographic determinist, too much of a natural resources determinist. He doesn't place enough emphasis in both explaining history and explaining the future on ideas. He oversimplifies stuff, and he gets stuff wrong. His whole interpretation of Russia and the war in Ukraine is wrong. In my view, he doesn't understand Putin. He doesn't understand the dynamics of what's going on there. He doesn't. Again, he doesn't understand the role and importance of ideas in shaping history and in shaping the present. So, yeah. But yeah, fascinating guy. I read his one book and a lot of interesting things. He's been his views on demographics, while I think overly deterministic, are also really eye-opening. He might be too much of a pessimist there in a sense of his models for demographic collapse seem to be much more aggressive in terms of much faster. It's happening much faster than most other models, but he might be right. I mean, things are happening very quickly in both China and Japan, and soon in South Korea, that he might be right about that. And overall, I think his view that the world is turning anti-globalism, anti-free trade is absolutely right and super scary. We should be very, very scared. There's no global issue that is more, if you will, scary than us turning our back on free trade. It'll be a disaster for the United States. It'll be a disaster for your standard of living, quality of life, and the jobs that you have. John says, I believe males are by nature more aggressive than females. Am I a biological determinist? Do you think first cousin marriages reduce intelligence? Yeah, I mean, of course, males are more aggressive than females. In generally speaking, I know some females who are more aggressive than males. So overall, primarily because of testosterone, men are, and you can see it in boys, more active, more physical, and therefore more aggressive than women. Now, is that biological determinism? No, it just says that male have a certain inclination that's different than inclinations of females. Females and men are different, are going to be different in many, many, many regards. Partially because of the fact that men are more muscular and stronger. That is going to dictate a certain attitude towards the world and towards activity and towards aggression. Women, because they're born with less musculature for the most part, are gonna have a different attitude towards all those kind of activities. But it has to do with the fact that women have a uterus and they have the potential of having babies, and they have a period, and men do not. And women have a lot more estrogen than men, and men have a lot more testosterone than women, and those things matter. But none of those things are going to determine what you are as an individual. It doesn't determine how aggressive you are going to be. I know a lot of men who are not aggressive at all. I know women who are a lot more aggressive than a lot of men that I know. These are just generalized inclinations that people have. Genes do matter up to a point, but they don't determine you in the sense of who you are, what you're going to be. And I, for example, have never said that intelligence is not to some extent determined by your genes. Of course it is. All I'm saying is IQ is not a very good measure of intelligence, and that intelligence is not only determined by your genes. Your genes are one factor. That much of your intelligence is cultural. People are much smarter today than they were 500 years ago because they're exposed to more, because there's an educational system, because they're expected to know more, because their minds are utilized when they're young in much more better ways, because more kids go to Montessori today than went to Montessori because it didn't exist 500 years ago, because of a lot of things. So intelligence is not unidimensional in terms of being determined by genes, and it's not unidimensional in terms of being measured by one test. I mean, IQ tells you something. It just doesn't. It's not, I don't think, it's not a proxy, and it's not a measure for, quote, capital I, intelligence. It's one measure. There are lots of measures. And the fact that various institutions, including the military, use different tests that are correlated with IQs, but are not exactly IQ tests, suggests that there are all kinds of aptitude tests that different organizations modify and change and create in order to test different things. But at the core of it is the fact that you recognize that biology it makes a difference. Some people are born tall and some people are born short. Does that make a difference in life? Yeah. Some people can play basketball, some people can't. If you're tall, it has certain psychological implications. If you're short, it might have certain psychological implications. All of that is true, but does that determine you? No. You take that as an input into your character, into your moral character, into the kind of person you become, into the kind of person you want to be, and then your choices actually shape who you become. And the culture which you live is going to help with that, and so on. So there is certainly nature, there is nurture, culture, society, and there are choices. And those three together determine who you are going to be. And I think of the three, the most important is not nature and not nurture, but choices you make. And whether you choose to use your mind or not, and how you use your mind, and how consistently you use your mind. So, I've never claimed otherwise. Do you think first-cousin marriages reduce intelligence? Yeah, yeah, of course. I mean, I think that has pretty much been shown. I mean, you can take a gene and you can flip it and cause people to be really, 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 really stupid, right? Or have Down syndrome, or do all kinds of genetic deviations that cause them to be really, really, really low on the intelligence tests. So, in that sense, that's kind of deterministic, because once you turn that flip, you make them so dumb that nothing matters. Yeah, and I said one of the one area where IQ tests are very good is measuring the very bottom of the scale, and there's not much you can do with people in the very bottom. I mean, there is things you can do culturally in the sense that there are jobs they can do, and I think AI and all of this will enhance their abilities. But there's not much you can do to change their intelligence below a certain threshold. But above that threshold, I mean, there's so much, there's so many variations, there's so many choices. So yes, you can genetically make somebody very, very stupid. And first cousin marriages certainly will do that. I think that nothing I just said will contradict anything I've said in the past about IQ and so on. If you actually listen to what I say. Friend Harper, would you consider having Robert Zurbin to talk about nuclear power? He was excellent at Power Hour, and I learned a lot from that interview. He came out with a book recently on the topic. Yeah, I've been thinking of having him on. I met him, of all places, in Korea, I think 2 years ago. Yeah, 2 years ago. Well, last year? Was it last year? I went to Korea last year. So last year, it seems like a really nice guy, huge Ayn Rand fan. So yes, he's on one of my lists to have on as a guest. All right, we made our target. Well, we're $1 short. We can manage the $1 short, although somebody could do a sticker and get us over that. All right, everybody. No show tonight, but there's Captain China just got us over. Thank you, Captain China. And it was the first super sticker that Captain China has ever done. So thank you, Captain China. What was I going to say? Yes, no show tonight. Show tomorrow morning, or about the same time as this, 1 o'clock, I think. There'll be a show, and then so that's tomorrow. Then tomorrow night there'll be a show. I'll continue. It'll be a show primarily on the future of the dollar. We'll see. Maybe I'll squeeze in another topic if somebody has any good ideas. Maybe we can squeeze in another topic in addition. And but maybe there's enough to talk about the dollar and dollarization, and maybe there's enough to talk about there. What else are we going to do? Yeah, and then Wednesday I'm traveling, so no shows Wednesday. Thursday I'll try to do a show on the road. It might be earlier in the morning than what you're used to, so I might try to do that from my hotel room. And then Friday we'll be back on schedule in the morning or in the early afternoon. And then I'll probably do an evening show on Friday to compensate for the fact that I didn't do an evening show on Thursday. And then there'll be a show on Saturday at 3 p.m. East Coast time. So that way we'll cover the week. Thank you. Thanks for getting us to our target. Really, really appreciate that. And I will see you all tomorrow.